we as students were trying to understand what we could do with conceptual art. Conceptual art really, Lawrence Weiner and so forth, nothing had to be made anymore. Everything was perfect. Painting was dead. Conceptual art, art as the word. What are you going to do after that? The artists before us were into the material of the picture. Frank Stella, the minimalists, all of that stuff. What I was interested in was the opposite. I was going to say that the image is real. Okay, when you look at a picture of a man, that man is there. And if I consider that man there, what's he thinking? What are his motivations? How is this? Where does he live? All of these questions I was asking, and I entered the picture. I was interested in this idea of figuration and going into the picture, going into figuration. And that led into comic books and details from comics, and that led weirdly into signs, international signs, that you found at airports and in bus stations and train stations. And I was making pictures that were signs. And that led into flags and posters and product design and all this and interface design. And this was going into the 80s. And then, I went into the applied art, so I have stained glass and ceramics and all that. And I also went into the virtual. So my work really anticipates the internet and anticipates all the kind of this world, which is a hybrid world between where we are now in this museum and where we are when we are, when I talk about a picture and I go into a picture. There's a hybridization where we're in a fictive universe, and yet we are inside a building in that fictive universe. And I've done that. I did that, 30 years ago. Coming up with new meanings. I mean, if I have red next to green, they're the opposite. Red is subjective and green is elements. And if I say, where does the red come from? It comes from the green. So the red actually does come from the body. The subjective does come from the body. And so that is a playing around. There are two cosmologies. One is a formal cosmology, what has to do with the before birth and after death, and God in heaven and all of that, like the cosmology of a church. And then the other cosmology has to do with semiotics and how there are five worlds in my stuff. This show is a very tight show. I mean, there's a lot of material in a very small space. And which is important. Also, the architecture of how the work is shown is very very evident. The big leaning canvases in the church, and then you have these are all hung. These are bed sheets, and how one represents their work. How one not just represents the work, but talks about the work, thinks about the work. Uses the work. That's what this is all about. The church, yeah, that was something. Having that offer to put up an exhibition in a space like that was just a gift, because when am I going to show? I'm an artist from Los Angeles, and to do a show in a place like that, with you have those ceilings and that whole thing. And the nice thing for me is I really wanted to affect the way the church feels more than the way the church looks. When you're walking through those giant, corridors of information, it's like these here. I'm creating space with pictures. The black and the white element, the linear element versus the solid element, those are all, of course, how one describes things, how we define subject matters, and because a line is most likely going to be the exterior of the thing itself. Now, I know for sure that I do not think in words. This is for sure. And I also know I know I don't think in pictures either. So if I don't think in words and I don't think in pictures, what do I think in? What is that form that's in my brain? And I think in feelings. I'm making work trying to understand the nature of life.